Okay. Hello. Um, Hi, Evgenia. How are you this evening?
I'm good. I'm just sitting here in a nice old house that is 200-year old and old growth forest that is older than this house. And there is rain outside. It's really beautiful. And how about you?
Hmm. I'm good. I'm a little bit tired. I'm working currently in Iceland, planting many, many trees. Um, some of it is regenerative, some of it is commercial, and I feel that this is kind of encompassing my background anyway in forestry. Um, so it's nice. It's summer, 24 hours of sunlight. And thankfully, I have blackout curtains.
Yeah, that helps. I was in Finland a few weeks ago, and I understand what you mean. It feels like a lot of energy, but you still need to rest and sleep, especially when you're doing the physical work that you're doing now. Well, great. I'm glad we made time to talk to each other and also share a bit of our ideas, visions, and observations about eternal forest with the others, especially as kind of feeling into that moment before the gathering of tribes this year. So let's go into that. So the
Yes,
first
absolutely.
question that we wanted to bring to ourselves and to all of you is, what is eternal forest? Why don't you start?
What is eternal forest? For me, I think that it's something necessary for introducing into the world of forestry and bridging gaps in communities and helping them to be able to really integrate themselves into the world of um, ecology and also for artistry, for exploring new alternative and um, diverse paths that we can have a relationship with nature, um, because it is part of us and something that I really like to help people to relate to. Nature is, you can live without you could live without a limb, you could live without a lung or an eye, but if the soil becomes so detrimental that you could not grow anything in it, the trees could not grow, or that we did not have clean air, which the trees are an amazing filter to provide. Um, how would you survive? And so nature and forests are really an extension of our physical being. So that begs the question, where does your body end and where does it begin?
Mhm.
So for me, this is a really good diverse representation of how that we can go into exploring um, forests and what is our relationship there.
Mm.
And for you, how
Yeah,
is
it's
it as a
interesting.
founder of it?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned this. Where does your body end and where does nature begin, or where does the forest begin? I actually have a poem that starts like this: Where do I end? Where do you begin? And that is the land speaking to the human. And I really love that because it's really like it's a continuity, and we belong to the earth, and the earth also belongs to us. We belong to each other, and we kind of have this continuous cyclical relationship between the earth and ourselves. And for me, eternal forest is about a physical space. So it's a sanctuary. I like to imagine that there is like a network of the sanctuaries around the world that are protected forever by the communities. But I also think that is a relationship in time and relationship with time. So as we evolve as beings, and I don't want to say species, let's say as beings, we also evolve our relationship with nature. So we used to have a very, very interwoven a spiritual relationship with nature where really there was no big difference between us receiving and giving. There was this constant, continuous gifting and exchange. We always find something to give back and to support, but also we receive a lot, of course. All of our culture comes, I like to say, all of our culture comes from the forest. But then we had this big gap where we was just taking and taking and taking and extracting. And I believe that now came time to give back. So in that way, eternal forest is this, I would say, spiritual path of giving back to the land, giving back to the earth, but also giving back to the communities, a kind of an offering, a gift that the communities can take upon themselves this adventure and this idea and vision of creating a sanctuary that would outlast one generation and will be there for the future generations of humans, but also more than humans. So other nature, as we call it, that basically creates this biodiversity hotspot that would serve for many, many generations. It would create resilience, would create beauty, would create enchantment once again, and would allow people to really, really enjoy the way they live with the forest. And yeah, and one other element to activate all of that is art, of course, to be able to communicate all of these ideas, but also to design concretely with the forest as a methodology. So that's what for me is eternal forest.
Yes, I mean, what you were saying there was so many pathways of conversation I was thinking that we could go down. But I think, really that eternal forest is also this rediscovering of the indigenous kind of wisdom of how we relate with nature and how we gift that back to the community, how we have a reciprocal relationship with Mother Nature as well. And for sure, this was really kind of strongly brought alive for me again by Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and how she talks about the indigenous tribes having a reciprocal relationship with the natural world. Yes, so in that, then there's the whole language which we open up and kind of can reconstruct in that relationship. So yes, I think both of us coming from a background with a passion for literature and for exploring language in this way is a really good angle to take in the artistry. And yes, that also being allowed to express itself in many forms of art. And I had this realization through a conversation last year about art not necessarily being this this end product, but something that's constantly evolving. And the same way that a forest or a tree isn't something that's an end product that needs to look this way, because a tree goes for the light. And it could be that another tree comes up alongside it and blocks this way of light. So it needs to find a new way. And, this is through time. Through time, it tells its story. It might envision or feel that it's going one way, but it needs to readjust in order to photosynthesize. So, yeah, that's I think like this kind of reflection of how that we need to work in this new evolving part of our being as humanity, is that we need to allow space for adjusting and um, seeing how do we evolve alongside nature.
Yeah, I really love the fact that you mentioned language and literature and the sonic language and the visual language and the language how we work with nature. Like, for example, mm, our language right now that we're using a lot is the language of tree planting, right? But we have always been there in the forest, in out there in the land. We have been facilitating the process of regeneration. And now, of course, they're discovering that many, many, many native people, including us, we just have forgotten it. It's kind of been taken away from our memory by Christianization. We have been always facilitating, we have been choosing seeds, we have been choosing certain species, we have been facilitating the process of reconnecting and like fertilization of this space. So I think that I would like to connect a couple of points here. One is I always have this question in me when I work in a specific place where like an eternal forest sanctuary can emerge. I'm asking who are the indigenous people here and who are the new indigenous people here. For example, working right now in Adirondacks, where I am in the US, which is this big state park. So it's the park of New York State, right? And native people have been displaced here. They've been pushed to the west from the east as deforestation started coming and the trees were being cut. But at the same time, there are certain elements that have been preserved here in the land. So it's like a secondary old growth forest. And there is a lot of lingering information in the air about the traditional, medicinal plants, and people start remembering. There is like some information going around. And of course, in other areas, more to the west, people still remember that language, that exchange, that reciprocity. And I do believe that that language of how we plant and how we design the actual regenerative process when we want forests to reemerge in certain areas, whether through rewilding or whether through intentional planting or whether through syntropic or whether through combination of different elements. I think it's a language in itself, and it's a very beautiful, creative language through which human beings, not necessarily artists, can express themselves. However, and that is the language also of that giving back to the planet, giving back to the earth. But I also think that actually I'm really hoping that artists can step in actively and say, well, we could actually use this methodology for creating works of art out there in the landscape, in the land, and contributing not just with the visual art and beautiful poetry and film and installation and performance, but also this hands-on regeneration. That's why I think it's very important when we think about eternal forest and how it works as a methodology is reconnecting all these different points to bring all the traditional elements that we use in art, the literature, the poetry, the performance out there in the forest. And that's a lot of the work that I like to do. But also things like weaving and creating the trails and planting along the trails and regenerating certain parts of the land where it's more likely that the forest can kick back and start growing, and then doing it over the years so we can see the result of this ecosystem kind of growing back, not as a plantation, if you plant all in one go, but as a gradual implementation of different elements of the ecosystem. So after some years, we start seeing that forest emerging as we kind of also contribute with working with community and working with art there and so on. So I think that rethinking what kind of language we're using, I like that kind of message that you're proposing and that kind of offering, I think is very active work that we need to do as artists, as humans, as regenerators, as organizations who are also doing larger scale work, and as communities as well.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast today And this guy was talking about how if you look at certain patterns of plants, how they tell stories of, you know, and a lot of it was colonial stories, um, from where maybe, for example, there was giant hogweed, which is it's quite a poisonous plant, and it was used to keep out um, peasants from aristocracy, or you know, people who had land and wanted to keep the peasants out. And it's amazing that we can use this evidence because of certain websites that document all of these plants. And he was also talking about animals and how they were introduced to certain countries for different reasons. But what I'm saying is there's this is a bit of a sad story, but I mean we can also turn this around and create amazing, beautiful stories through recreating old growth forests. Um, so that in the future, like as we're doing this as a generational project, which is going to carry on far, far beyond our lifetimes, how can people look back and see the patterns then which humans with a more evolved state of consciousness were doing things in order to help one another and to be inclusive rather than to be exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So I found this his storytelling and the storytelling of plants which he was speaking through very inspiring, to be able to turn this around. It's really nice that it came today actually, because
Yeah,
it's perfect for this talk.
great.
Yeah.
So I would like to go to think together about the question why eternal forest today is important to do. So why this project exists. So maybe let's try to reflect on that subject a bit.
Okay, for me, like I said before, I've worked in forestry for a little while now. I've felt the calling to work with nature and all of its elements for quite a time now. But what I realized that when I'm working in tree planting, by and large, is you know something that's a little bit more commercial, not necessarily so natural. When we're planting in lines, we don't always plant in lines. Uh, just to defend the industry, but we plant in lines, and it's not so natural. And when you visit, many woodlands, many forests, you can see when it's man-made. Um, Even when the trees are 30, 40 years old, you can see these lines so obviously. So essentially, yes, it's for ecological restoration. It's for recreating old growth forests, which we only have something like 3% globally now. That's astonishing considering like some countries where 90% forests, only 300 years ago in some countries still. Um, and it's also really for me a part of kind of building these bridges between human and nature, as an essential part of moving forward, um, with our story with the world.
Mm.
So those three things really drive me in why is Eternal Forest, and why do I choose to be involved, and why why am I passionate about bringing other people into it? Yeah.
Thank you. That's wonderful. So I'll share a little bit on my side. So I come to that why from perspective of shifting the goalpost in our culture. So I'm very, very curious how one single person in their life can actually contribute to shifting culture in the way where we see, you know, certain things are not working and we want things to continue working and to flow. I do believe that one person just by themselves cannot do too much. That's why Eternal Forest is kind of a global movement. I hope so. So we are really starting. We're kind of the first ones, the pioneers, pioneer plants, pioneer species. So my hope is that with this kind of distributed movement, and with more people joining, we can shift culture from short-term thinking to long-term thinking, from just thinking just about ourselves as individuals for this life to multi-generational projects, large-scale projects, projects that have continuity, that fill in the gaps in the disruption that we created in our social network, in our ecological webs. And I feel that Eternal Forest can really contribute. Another why I think is that mending the broken flow in the land. I'm really curious how with our efforts, regenerative efforts, we can restart, we can reconnect, we can let the land, the energies of the land flow again, because what you see in functioning ecosystems and functioning forests is just flows. One thing follows the other. The boundaries are very gentle. One thing merges with another. The whole question of what is a body, what is organism, what is a species, what is individual, it's just like it becomes a very philosophical question because nature is showing you all other things and aspects and other processes. So forest becomes a process, and I'm very much with that. And I also like one of the whys for me is I want to bring arts and artists and curators and artistic foundations and galleries a little bit more into the space of forest becoming a true medium for many, not just for one person, not just for those chosen artists who have very strong perspective of working with the ecosystem as their primary medium. And I want more people to support this kind of work, not just in the traditional art world, but also in non-traditional ways of people really giving back. And I think that channel of culture and art is a beautiful channel that can partner with regenerative organizations, planting organizations, communities that can channel the energy, the creative energy towards not just creating those huge pieces of works for biennales that are completely from artificial materials and go directly in the storages where people pay a lot of money to that. Instead, creating new kind of art that is embedded and rooted in the land, that grows literally through the mycelial network and creates those beautiful spaces. And we can still do all the traditional things alongside. So kind of bringing a generation and then next generation of artists who can do this kind of work and contribute. And I feel very inspired in that sense. And there are many other whys, but I think these are the main ones. And probably over it kind of hovers like an umbrella our spiritual connection with nature. So restoring the spiritual connection with the forest and really seeing forest as intrinsic, as this being that has this intrinsic value with all its beings that also have the right to exist. So really highlighting their voice, bringing their voice to the forefront and giving them just space to be and seeing how nature kicks back and how she does her best work if we let her do that work.
So who is Eternal Forest for? Who are we aiming to bring?
So Eternal Forest is for, first of all, is for communities that have a focus on living on the land or living with the land and being the stewards of the land. And in that case, we propose, this is our vision, that the community becomes a guardian and a steward of an eternal forest sanctuary. So apart from having their houses, their shared space, their shared gardens, their permaculture project, perhaps a school, they can have an eternal forest on their land. And perhaps if they wish, they can have an art science residency attached to it, where they receive artists who create artworks and participate in forest regeneration. What do you think?
I think in that, you know, I mean, it all flows into the next thing, and we want to bring in tree planting organizations because there are so many of them around the world. I work with planters from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the Canadians, amazing planters, the French, wherever. There's so many tree planting organizations around the world, and they have access to huge amounts of land. They have access to landowners and also so many different kind of forester organizations, the ones that are more traditional. And we want to build relationships with these people to in order to encourage the ensuring of old growth forests in order to to change and win over the hearts and minds of these guys so that we're guaranteeing that old growth forest is ensured wherever we're planting trees. That would be the ideal.
Yeah, I think that just to reflect a little bit on this regenerative forestry, it's really interesting to observe how different projects are looking at forest conservation and protection. And because we have taken out so many forests, and the moment we cut even selectively, we do a huge disruption for the ecosystem. So I think that our focus probably in the first eternal forest sanctuaries for many years would be just really making sure that we restore and we protect. We try not to cut anything. But I think eternal forest is really that sacred space where we want like species to feel safe. We want to give them a chance. Yeah, one of other places and spaces like we could work with, I'm thinking about is eco resorts. I think there is a growing number of all kinds of ecological retreats and resorts, and I have quite a few friends who are building those. And these could be spaces that have forest on their locations, so they can offer the visitors this additional beneficial aspect of going, walking in this beautiful, inspiring forest and having the artistic experience there, immersive experience. And it can be also locations and projects that ensure that they support local initiatives. So let's say an eco resort would be based next to a natural park where it is not necessarily on their land, but we could collaborate with local partners like a network, like where I'm staying now in the US, that's exactly the case. It's protected area, they have protected trails, they have established organizations, conservations, private and statewide. And it's like a layered cake where a local eco resort could have an offering where a trail is activated and it's part of a tunnel forest network, and people would benefit from having that access to an old growth protected forest. So that's yet another possibility. What else can we think of?
Mm-hmm.
Who else can we think of?
Who else do you think of? We've been talking recently about bringing in like earth rights lawyers. And I think this is such a massive integral part of moving forward with eternal forest in order to kind of create these manifestos and let's say the care programs and understanding, what responsibilities is involved in the stewardship of taking care of old growth forest. And yeah, who else better than to bring in some experts um, of these earth rights lawyers who it is actually, I think, a more emerging profession now that there's been a number of successes in terms of uh, indigenous campaigning from many many tribes across the world, as well as people who are really just concerned and bringing this up in the court system. Um, so yes, this is something that we're exploring deeply, and I really love. I'm really excited for the conversations that we're going to have with these people. Can you think of
Wonderful.
another, Evgenia?
Yeah, I really love that this circle of people. I think there's a fairly established Earth right lawyers movement, and there are some big names out there that kind of paved the way. I also think that connected directly with the earth rights from the legal perspective. So I always think it's like communities on one hand. How can we establish communities that protect forests and love their forests? And this is important that the community is there. And law and legal is on the other hand. And just to say that I've been speaking to some lawyers and they said, look, law is something written by humans. It's something we have agreed on and we wrote these documents. There is no reason why we cannot rewrite those documents. And this is very high time right now, high moment where it's time to rewrite them slowly but surely. So this is going to happen. And I think the link that I'm going to make from the earth right and nature rights is also the voice of the land and people who are really talking that voice and talking for the voice of the forest, who are the poets, the writers, the artists, the scientists as well. So let's say the humanities and academics that are looking at plant consciousness and specialists and experiential practitioners who are working with eco-philosophy, eco-psychology, forest bathing, artists who are directly working with the forest as a methodology. So all this beautiful circle of creative people who are offering their time, their body, their, the hand that writes and their voice to bring through them the voice of nature, the voice of the forest, the voice of animals, the voice of ecosystem, the voice of plants. So those are the ones that we are definitely completely opening the doors and inviting, and we are creating conditions for them to be able to have those places, spaces, art residences, communities that they can visit and they can collaborate with. Okay, how about the
Mhm.
next one? What else is coming to your mind?
Yeah, just to add on that as a success story, that New Zealand has recently passed a law to give rivers rights as human or as beings, as much as sentient beings. So it is being done there, and I think that we can take the blueprints from success stories like this. Um, yeah, on top of that, who else are we inviting? Um, Ecologists, um, environmental engineers, people who have a lot of experience in what it takes to really well manage um, biodiversity and creating um, restored ecosystems. Because essentially, um, it's not necessarily just about the trees in the forest. Um, it's about the whole multi-layer that makes up a forest. I think um, when we talk about forests, it's really central about the trees in our minds, but um, every every species has a role to play. Um, from the multi layers of the canopy to the grasses, the mosses, the mycelium, the insects, the mammals, um, the the roaming herds, the migrating herds. Um, yeah, all of this, has a function, and it's something that in forestry management, especially with I've noticed, especially with not having necessarily like mammals within our ecosystems anymore that are wild. There's a lot that has to be done by humans in order to keep up the health of a forest. So talking about into the future, um, like Portugal has recently done actually about reintroducing bison. Um, this is something that is self-managing in nature. They do a lot of the pruning, a lot of the keeping the overgrowth plants in check. So yes, I think it's really important that we have these people here who are helping to implement and support communities into integrating these different beings.
Wonderful. Yeah, I do love working with scientists. I think they are our best friends. I also think, and I've done fair bit of work collaborating with scientists and certain universities. I think that in the future, the way I see that every eternal forest can have like a monitoring program, continuous monitoring program where biodiversity is monitored over long periods of time. And we could do something that's called long-term ecological research. We can, of course, talk much more about it. I just wanted to mention that this is very much part of the circle of partnerships. And other, I think, possible approaches I would like to put out there because we're already working, especially in Portugal, our municipalities and local governments. I think these are very key and very, very important because they have their own land. They have access to communities. They work on a very different level. They can work on bigger levels, but kind of more focused on bioregions. So they're not necessarily looking after the whole land of the nation state, but they are much closer to the people, but also they have this kind of bigger overview of what's happening in their region. They understand that the whole land dynamics and they also understand the priorities. Usually they have very different culture in different places. But for example, in Portugal, we are developing one project in Torres Vedras, and I think this is very exciting because it is already like a cluster of different partnerships that's springing into place. There's a cultural organization that's responsible for the art and art residency. There's like a local organization that's working with the community, that's municipality, that's freguesia. So we are always looking at creating all this, multi-layered cake where the certification is possible. It's like a growing of a forest. We want everybody to participate. We want the whole community to come on board. And of course, then we'll be also bringing scientific element. And maybe just to say that I think foundations in different parts of the world that have land, whether they are cultural foundations and artistic foundations that have maybe sculpture park or sculpture garden, have their collection on the land, but maybe they also have woods or a part of land that they would like to put away into this kind of project. And also foundations that generally have land that can also dedicate their space and time to this kind of work. I think this is also our possible collaborations and partnerships. So we definitely would love to bring them on board. And then I would like to say that perhaps we could leave it at that and say what our listeners and those who are also going to connect with us and come to the Gathering of Tribes, what they think. So maybe they can also write underneath this
Yes,
video their ideas and send us not just ideas, but maybe some concrete links. We are always happy to connect with everyone. So
yes,
send us your proposals, ideas. If you are a community out there that think like you feel aligned, then let's talk.
yes, absolutely. Please, and I'm sure there's little pockets of ideas that we've missed. So come ahead, please talk to us, connect. We're here having conversations, but we're two humans, and there's many minds out there to contribute.
Two
Yes.
humans and the
So,
world forest.
yes, the forest and the soil ready to be regenerated and, yeah, reimagined, rewilded. So on that note as well, we're coming up to Gathering of Tribes soon, in 2 months' time, which is very exciting. Um, and we've both been sharing a lot with our networks. But what can we be expecting in these 4 days that we're all going to be together?
Okay, maybe I'll start and then you can also continue. So, first of all, Eternal Forest is an open camp. So, we're really inviting anybody who is aligned with the values of our organization and our movement, who aligns with the values of forests. We would love to continue weaving international networks. So, the camp is open to all of those of you who are thinking of either creating a protected forest on your land, supporting your community, leading your community. Perhaps you're a thinker, writer, artist, scientist, creator who feels to contribute with a workshop to the program, an experience, a conversation. If you're a tree planting organization or an organization that does regenerative work, absolutely welcome. The way we feel the program can be organized, those days can be organized, is really going deeper into thinking how places, communities, and organizations can implement an eternal forest sanctuary. So we'll really go deep into in our workshops to think about the how and to think about concrete roadmap, like what is step-by-step scenario then one project can adopt and how a different project in parallel can readapt this model to their reality, because of course we don't expect that the model will be copied, but we expect that the model will be co-created amongst different projects to create like a blueprint, and then they will be adapted to the concrete reality of every community and every organization. And just to say that we would love to have a combination of like hands-on workshops where we think, we analyze, we imagine, we write everything up, we draw everything together and collaborate on this part of the how and how do we bring this vision into reality. And then we'll have lots of celebratory experiential time where we could experience the forest, because we will be in this beautiful forest that you see behind me. So artists, practitioners will offer interventions and experiences, and we'll be able to really dissolve into this beautiful space together. There will also be lots of space to connect with others. And if you're a project looking for collaborators, then you can find those collaborators there. What else, Dylan? What I'm missing?
I think there's going to be like you said, a lot of dynamic exploration in which we are really going deep into these questions. We already have a short list of questions and how we can create this blueprint. Of course, there's a space for co-creation, and we will be exploring in the next few months how we're going to put a program together, and there will be the opportunity for our partners and our participants to create workshops and come with their own perspectives, and also an interactive kind of needs workshop in personalizing what it is to explore this together, to create this together. Yes, I think it's really a dynamic. It's really going to be a dynamic camp, and I'm super looking forward to the kind of the storytelling matching with the practical, the practical envisioning of the future.
Sorry, go on.
Apart from that, there's going to be so many other camps which we will be able to, kind of swap participants with and explore other ideas from them.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
this is, I
we
think, a very important part of the whole story. It's not like we are inside one bubble. I think important to know, and actually there's many camps that I know are coming that are our partners or our partners in the making. So even that they are making their own camp, they have intention or they have a dedication sometimes already to create an eternal forest sanctuary. So I've already been speaking to some of such organizations that are there, but we are doing two camps in parallel, several camps in parallel. So we'll be also pulling people from other camps to participate in some of our sessions because some of them are experts or some of them are bringing a specific question or they can host a specific discussion. So there is a lot of this interpenetration and kind of pollinization will go on because, as I said before, Eternal Forest is for everybody, it's very open. And we are very much expecting that the networking will happen. I think we also want to invite all of you to become ambassadors of Eternal Forest so that then you can go out into the world and continue talking to people, continue talking to your communities about Eternal Forest. And who knows, maybe you will be one of the co-creators of one of the sanctuaries. One thing I wanted to add is I think we're going to offer a good chunk of time to connect with forest and connect with the land, like really going deeper. And this is, I think, is going to be like really contemplative work that we going to experience together. So through artistic experiences or other kinds. So be prepared that it's really a combination of the very focused time, collaborating and working together and cooking things, contemplative time where we go together in this guided work and by yourself individually, co-creation that will happen right there. And then the kind of free time where you can go explore, network, pollinate, and so on. So it's very mixed. It's just 5 days, not even full 5 days. So it will be full on. But I think we have time to sleep and dance.
Yes, I think there will be also there will be also time to dance. Not necessarily in our camp that we have um, an ecstatic dance or anything, but I'm sure that there are other camps giving these experiences. Yeah, what to say? What to say about the garden, the event space that it's being held at? That it is a beautiful lush landscape.
Yeah.
That it has a river, it has a little lake that's possible to swim in. It's mid-September in Portugal, actually, my favorite month in Portugal. It's not too hot, it's not cold yet, you know. I think it's just a really, really nice month to come to Portugal. Stay for longer, come for before if you have some time. Yeah, it's a very big space. It's got, I think, a sauna. I think it's got a hot tub. Um, the food will be the there will be food provided by vendors, and there will be a community kitchen, which is also beautiful that we get to create meals together, to cook together.
And there is
There is
a
a
forest,
forest, of
of
course,
course.
in a forest. I already have some ideas of how I would like to create art around trees, inspired by some people that I've just come into contact with over the years. This is 2 months' time. What do we need today?
Perfect. Good question. What do we need today? Well, first of all, we want all of you to join whoever come are the right people. So if you feel you are the right people to be part of this camp and have forest fun with us, get your tickets as soon as possible. Share those videos with your friends, please. This is not just for the gathering of tribes necessarily. If you cannot come, of course, please share it with your network, because we are working internationally. After gathering of tribes, we will be working on connecting with various communities around the world, creating partnerships, building our organization. This is a very, very new organization. So we have new people joining, and we're very much looking forward to kind of, creating it in a very organic stages, like forest does, like a forest succession does. So if you know any of the organizations, communities, people that can help us co-create this movement, please send them our way. I guess this is one of the asks. So become eternal forest ambassadors and guardians, please. And what else, Dylan?
Well, it costs nothing, what she said, exactly.
Yes.
And the, the best things usually do, actually. Yes, if you feel called by yourself, by your heart, to reconnect, to be a bridge between humans and nature, please share your voice. Come from that place that's calling from inside you. That we all know that we're in a space now where we really desperately need to support biodiversity into its big comeback, because I believe that this is happening. This is not the end of our story, that we're going to eat up the world like this, but it has to come from every individual to take responsibility. And like you said earlier, it's not for one person to do, it's for us to do collectively and joyfully. And with that, when it comes together like this and it's rolling, I feel so much joy and love that everyone has their set of skills that's so unique to them. And when you find the right people, we're activating each other, making this come alive. And you feel it in yourself. You feel good. You feel like, this is where I'm supposed to be. That's not to say that there is no hard work involved, of course, but that hard work is the biggest reward at the end of the day. It's the one that you look back at the end of the week, the month, the year, the lifetime, and you're like, okay, I really did something that carries legacy.
Mm.
And that's, that's it. It still comes down to presence. It comes down to focus, but also the fact that, there's a lot of climate anxiety in the world. Or the term climate anxiety, fairly new term, but be present and relax and know that there is a great part to play in this story. Yeah, you're invited.
Mhm. It's beautiful. Bring your gifts, bring the gifts that you have, and bring yourselves together with your gifts, and let the forest support our process, because the forest is always there to support us. So this is yet the time that forest can support our process, while we are helping the forest to become stronger, so we can continue stronger into the future together. Yeah. So look forward to seeing you.
Yes. And I just want to say that in the forest, there's a lot that goes on beneath the surface,
Mm.
that so much of the networking that trees do is beneath the surface through their mycelial connections. And this is really like a growing term now, where people are talking about networking as a kind of mycelial structure. Well, here it is in human form, but also the opportunity for that to happen on an ecological involvement. I think that's a nice way to finish, right?
Thank you.
We are helped by nature.
Thank you
Hmm.
so much. What a beautiful exchange. Thanks so much for being here and
Yeah,
thanks so much for contributing. And yeah, look forward to meeting in person.
and then we're going to be brainstorming together further. We're going to have a connecting call with everyone who's going to be involved, and I'm sure that that list will keep on growing. There will still be people maybe signing up right until a week before, but I think better to get involved earlier so that we can connect and get the most out of the camp together.
Wonderful. So get your tickets as soon as
Yeah. So
possible,
thank
as
you.
Dylan suggests, and get your voice through so that we can co-create and finalize the program together. Thank you so much.
Thank you.